raising a key question today. Can any of Trump's trials beat the election clock? So for the answer, we're going to go to NBC's Hayes Brown, writer and editor for MSNBC Daily, and Kristen Gibbons-Felden, former assistant district attorney in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, now civil rights attorney and MSNBC legal analyst. Welcome to you both. Hayes, I'll go to you first here, because the Times lays it out. 3 different prosecutors, 4 different cities next year in the midst of a presidential campaign, saying that it's going to be nearly impossible to pull it off. What are you hearing about the potential timing?
Well, I mean, the Trump legal strategy has always been to delay as much as possible,
right,
to try and push back these trials as much as possible, ideally until after the full election. That's not going to happen. We are not, I feel like, going to be seeing these federal cases stretched out that far. But he does have a point that for the criminal cases, at least, he does have to be there for them. He does need to be in court for those cases. There are, let's not forget, 2 other civil cases that he's facing, both in New York. One, a federal civil case against another defamation case against E. Jean Carroll, and one, a civil case from Letitia James, the New York Attorney General, against his business. So he is going to have a lot to do. The civil cases, he doesn't have to be there. He wasn't there for the first E. Jean Carroll defamation suit. He probably won't show up for this one. But the rest of them, he does need to be there. So it's going to be a real balancing act, and it's going to take up a lot of his time over the next few months at the starting at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. Referring to the delay tactic, here's what Trump's former White House lawyer, Ty Cobb, says about Trump's proposal of a 2026 trial date start. Let's watch that.
That's nowhere, within the neighborhood of the universe of, possible dates. I don't think that was a lawyer decided date. I think that probably was a Trump dictated date. I'm sure that the lawyers, proposed something slightly more reasonable. I think this case, the election interference case in particular, can easily be tried before the summer of 2024.
So a couple of points there, Kristen. First of all, do you agree with Ty Cobb? And what makes this election case easy to wrap up by next summer?
Well, I do agree with Ty. I think that the dates that he states are definitely Trump-driven. But listen, I think that, and it also is consistent with his delay, but I think Hayes really makes a really good point in that, Donald Trump's first strategy is delay. But then keep in mind that these courts are really not hearing his delay tactics. And so his secondary thing is, let's make this trial my campaign. So really these trial dates are turning into his campaign. He's really rallying up to allow these trial dates to really be what he is campaigning on. So now he has turned his delay tactic into they're out to get me. And so even though he's got the October Trump Organization hearing coming up, he's got the E. Jean Carroll trial that Hayes was talking about kicking off on the same day as the Iowa primaries, he's going to utilize these trials to really be his campaign points. And you know what? The polls are really supporting that tactic.
No, it's true. But do you think that the election case, could that be wrapped up by next summer if it goes forward, if he doesn't win on delay tactics?
It could be wrapped up. Absolutely. But I think the Trump lawyers do make a really good point. When you talk about the very first production of documents being 11 million pages, the trial date pushed out, a year and a half makes sense. But again, the court is not going to allow that. What I think she's going to say is, look, Mr. Trump, it is time for you to hire more attorneys if you cannot handle the production and if you cannot allow that to be part of your defense. So she's absolutely going to force that to be wrapped up before the end of next summer. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's understandable. Okay, NBC News is reporting that Trump plans to surrender late next week. Fani Willis wants all 19 defendants indicted on the 41 counts to surrender by next Friday, with arraignments to start September 5th and a potential trial date of March 4th of next year. But Kristen, these surrenders will come in a heightened threat environment. There's one woman charged with threatening D.C. Judge Tanya Chutkan. D.A. Willis is facing racist abuse after the indictments. And then new today, the FBI is joining the investigations of threats to grand jurors. Can any of this play a role in Georgia's terms of release for Trump and the other 18?
It absolutely can. But I think one thing that is critical is that these are not necessarily individuals who are directly linked to Trump. Do we believe it based on his past history, based on the fact that there was the insurrection, based on all of his tweets? Absolutely. But you cannot hold an individual liable for the actions of others, and you cannot dictate the bail based on that with very thin links. It's way too remote. It's way too indirect.
So the indictment highlights more than 20 phone calls allegedly made by Trump and close associates, 7 to officials in Pennsylvania. You got 3 to officials in Arizona, several to officials in Georgia. Hayes, how many times have we heard Donald Trump describe his phone calls as perfect? So why are Fulton County prosecutors zooming in on these?
So I think one thing you have to remember is that these are what are called overt actions in favor that helped push forward the one RICO charge that all 19 defendants are facing. They were actions to help perpetrate the criminal conspiracy to overturn the election. So while Trump may say they were perfect, these were all calls pushing people in state legislatures mostly to overturn the results of the election in their state. And if not state legislators, state officials like Brian Kemp and Brad Raffensperger, they were calls that were specifically about, hey, you need to throw out the results of this election and say that Trump was the winner. So they're focusing on these calls because even though they were calls that had a specific ask to throw out the results of the election. And they kept pushing these same points throughout the layers of this scheme. When it didn't work to go directly to the state legislators, they went to the governors. When that didn't work, they went to the fake electors to try to get the fake electors to have a reason to throw it back to the state legislatures so that the Republicans there could say, you're right, these are the real electors, and Donald Trump won the election. It was all part of the same big spiraling conspiracy, and that's why they focused in on these calls, because they are direct evidence of Trump and his team trying to push that conspiracy forward.
And to your point, specifically so. All right, let's take a look at a handful of Trump's tweets that have been listed in the indictment. Directing followers to hearings in the GOP-dominated Georgia Senate. You have falsely claiming to have far more votes than needed to flip Georgia. And then, of course, calling Governor Brian Kemp a fool and suggesting 2 senators could have a bad day, whatever that means, on January 5th. Calling Brad Raffensperger clueless for refusing to engage the false claims. And in pressuring Mike Pence, falsely claiming that states wanted to correct their votes. Kristen, tell me why these are not being treated as free speech.
These aren't being treated as free speech because it really goes into the conduct. Look, DA Willis's approach is very clear based on her indictment. She's treating Trump like a mafia boss, right? Not just a common criminal. That's why the racketeering charges have been incorporated into the criminal charges. This means that Trump's patterns of behavior across all of these activities, talking about the phone calls that Hayes just talked about and the tweets that you just mentioned, Alex, these all highlight that intent. And that is critical for proving these charges beyond a reasonable doubt. The intent behind endorsing fraud claims, right, during the Georgia legislative hearings, the targeting of officials, like you mentioned, Kemp and Raffensperger, and then trying to sway Pence over the Electoral College. Together, all of that really suggests a concerted effort to really interfere with the elections, even if in a vacuum they aren't criminal or might have some defense under the First Amendment. They all together show that racketeering. It shows like the top of that criminal organization as well as that criminal intent.